Hi, I'm Karuna. I'm the founder and executive director for Oasis, and this is Meditation Happy Hour, Tea, Talk, and Truth with Karuna. And my guest today is Kelly Sell. Kelly, how are you?
Good. Thanks, Karuna.
Where in the world are you?
I am in Bellingham, Washington.
And have you lived there long?
No, we moved here in November. So what are we at? 7 months, 8 months. It's amazing.
What do you like to do in or around Bellingham?
Mountain bike, which is incredible because I live close enough to be able to ride my bike to Mount Galbraith, which is amazing mountain biking. And then we have a community boat center, and I've always wanted to boat on the Sound, which they are now calling the Puget Sound, is a section of what is called the Salish Sea. But that's a whole nother podcast about environments and stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna learn how. I've been out sea kayaking, tried to learn how to row a rowing school, which was bad on my back, but I'm gonna learn to sail in a couple of weeks. So it's amazing.
Awesome. So you have earth and sea, which is amazing.
Yes. And the trees here are incredible. They're huge. They're bigger than the trees I grew up with on Oregon coast. They're massive.
Wow. Very cool. Good. So I like to start this podcast sort of the same way with everyone. I'd love to hear about your morning so far. What have you been up to? What's it look like in Kelly Sell's world?
Well, it's a weird thing. I never have the same day twice. Never have. And I guess that's part of I've been self-employed since I was 19, for the most part, with jobs here and there. So every day is different. That's really true. So today we needed to get up because we had to be on this podcast. Christina had an appointment. So we just got up, had espresso, walked the dog.
Christina is your wife. So you have a
wife.
wife that lives with you, and who else is in your house?
We have two 16-year-old cats and Lockett, the 5.5-year-old rescue from Lockhart, Texas.
Very cool.
That's who we've got in the house. Yeah.
So Kelly, you are bringing a series and a free mini workshop to Oasis, and we are very excited. Before we go into all of the details about that, what I'd love to hear is a little bit about your background. So what you like to teach and sort of who you studied with and all that good stuff.
Well, that is a big question. Right now with the mindfulness self-compassion, how would I say? I wasn't into any this therapeutic education or anything until my wife and I were having a very hard time in our marriage back in 2008. And we had moved from Arizona, where we had a great teacher and friend there in Arizona named Lee Lozowick. And his guru was Yogi Ramchandra Kumar. And we have great friends there in Northern Arizona, but I was never really a student. I was more a friend of Lee's, and particularly Lee's kids. It's how I entered that group, playing, having fun. And then in 2008, our marriage was having a very difficult time, and I went away, luckily, to something called the Hoffman Quadrinity process, which was an 8-day-long therapeutic educational experience. And you're off the grid, you hand in your cell phone, and you are before dawn to late at night doing all kinds of experiential exercises, visualizations, learning a ton of stuff. You're working in a group of 40 people, you're working in small groups. And it was an amazing thing. It really changed who I was. I literally even looked different in the mirror when I looked at myself, because there's so much somatic work. So the Hoffman process is absolutely amazing. Sadly, it burned the major facility in White Sulphur Springs out of St. Helena, California, burned up last year. But they've had people, and they have a new place where they offer that program. So that really changed how I thought about everything. And I was introduced to the idea of compassion at that time. I grew up in a very family with no compassion, I would say, and that idea, which is a whole nother history. And I had a little tiny compassion practice I started back then, not having any idea. It was just for me to light a candle, read the definition of compassion, and to have that for myself. Anyway, that started a process of learning about being compassionate with others. And it really helped me. And I was also in Chinese medicine school at that time. And so I came back from that, and I was actually able to sit with a patient in a way and hear them without just constantly judging them as whatever type of person. I was actually could connect to their suffering empathetically for the first time. Now, that was also hard for me because it was the first time in my life where I could feel all my feelings, and I felt terrible because I could feel, and I had to deal with the hard stuff in my marriage and all kinds of things. So it was really a wild time. And I remember having friends from that time coming out of that program. They're like, "That it's not better. I wish I hadn't done it." Because that first year of integration into the idea that there's all kinds of feelings was a huge thing for me. So that really started just a whole new time, and I was able to sit in meditation in a new way, which I've learned a ton about. And we'll talk. The program I'll be teaching in that 6 weeks program is a tiny bit of a 9-session program that's 2.5 to 3 hours long for 9 sessions. And also, what's entered into the conversation is trauma around meditation and having to work in a very particular way with people who have a lot of trauma in their past. Try to sit in meditation, and it is terrible, and it is hard, and they blame themselves that I can't meditate, I don't know how to do it right. But we're opening the door of practice. And I was just listening to Dr. Robert Savoda talk about the idea of starting sadhana, and it releases poison. And it was such a wild way to hear how when we first can open the door to emotions, it doesn't feel good. But if we can't feel the bad emotions, we can't feel the good ones in the same way. But that's just, what I think. So then that led to working with other therapists over the time. And I had a therapist give me what's called the self-compassion break that Kristen Neff teaches, which we talk about. And she didn't say anything about Kristen Neff. She just said, I think you need to do this exercise every day. Just start your day with it. And it was a tough one because it was a certain time when I had just learned that I had grew up with a bunch of sexual abuse and trauma that I had forgotten until I was 39. Mm-hmm. Luckily, in a disturbing way, my younger sister was like, "Oh yeah, don't you remember? Da 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 da." She remembers everything. I remember nothing. So I have this weird gift. It actually happened, but not understanding how it affected my life. So that was years ago in 2011. And because I grew up Catholic and probably a decade of sexual abuse in the church. And that's a whole nother subject. But without having had this self-compassion work, there's no way I could have handled that information. I just couldn't have. It was just, I barely could handle it then, but I had some tools to be with myself, and I had a community of friends, and it was amazing how many people I could bring that up to who had stories to share that I had never heard. So it opened an entire world that has been difficult, but has helped some people too at the same time. So I got this self-compassion break just as a daily practice. And you have to bring up some suffering to actually do this practice. But that was easy at that time because it was overwhelming me. It's happening all the time. I mean, so, these little daily traumas and things. And then my therapist was like, well, that's from Kristen Neff, and there's this whole world of mindfulness, self-compassion. I was like, no, I know. You just told me to do this thing. I did it because I needed to survive every morning, to get through the day, to deal with the new information I would get about my upbringing, my family, my history, my marriage, whatever was going on. And so I got her book and I read it. It's great. And then randomly, Christina and I were coming to Colorado for a summer in 2016 when we had our cute little cabin, which I missed desperately. Kristen Neff and Chris Germer happened to be teaching a week-long intensive, mindfulness self-compassion intensive at the Shambhala Center outside Red Feather Lakes.
Sure.
Right? And so it was random. I was going to be there. Christine was going to be home. I could drive up and just do this week-long thing, which was what I needed to become a teacher. But at that time, I was like, I'm going to go do this week because it'd be amazing for me to sit with them and to have all that education. And then, so that just led to like, wow, I guess I could teach this stuff. And I started teaching it just to my patients who would come in to get treatments, which I guess we could tell people I do Chinese medicine. Just a little thing, because you come in, especially when you're in pain and chronic pain, and it's hard on, it wears on you. And so to have little practices to learn to be nice to ourselves when we're suffering can be helpful. So, and then I had some random things happen for the teacher training that was, to me, an incredible story of serendipity, which I can tell, but it can be a little bit boring. But it was a lot of surprising thing came together for the ability to do a teacher training. And so then I could start teaching the MSc. So.
Kelly, connect a couple of dots for us. How is it, in your opinion, that self-compassion helps with trauma specifically and or chronic pain?
Well, the trauma is a big one. And there's a great researcher. So a lot of this stuff comes out of research with Kristen Neff, Chris Germer, Paul Gilbert. There's a man named David Trelevin who's from Canada, but he's in Berkeley, I think is where he's working. And he has a whole book on trauma-informed mindfulness. And so the idea with I guess the mindfulness self-compassion is we have to ask ourselves the mindfulness first, what's really happening? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And then we ask the question, what do we need? Because a lot of times we've grown up in such a way that when we ask what's going on or what do we need, we don't hear a nice voice in our heads. We often are very hard on ourselves. And depending on who we are and how we grew up, we can be very hard on ourselves when we're going through a hard time, that we're doing it wrong, we're not doing it right. We're, to use the term, we're a fuck up, or, we're messed up, or whatever the thing is that we say to ourselves. They're showing in research that it's not helpful when we're dealing with a hard time that we hear stronger, harder voices. And there's this amazing thing in Paul Gilbert talks about when somebody yells at us or says something to us strongly, negatively, our body has a whole cascade of chemical events that happen that make us feel a certain way. And we know that happens in the brain and we can measure it. If we silently say those same words to ourselves in our brain in the same voice, our body does the same thing. It doesn't know the difference whether if it's us saying it to ourselves or if somebody is saying it to us, which is really an amazingly intense and sad thing to learn. Just thinking about how we can often talk to ourselves. So when we're dealing with trauma, and I am no expert, I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner who's had to do this work on my own. So I'm not a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm, just some guy who can sit with people and likes to ride his bike. But in that learning of sitting with my own trauma and learning that if I can be nice to myself, I'm able to maybe make more mistakes, fail, and get back up and explore things a little bit more. I can be nicer to self when I feel bad. The best example of self-compassion or mindfulness self-compassion and why we would do it is if we have a little kid who's sick, if we are really nice to them, it doesn't make them get better any faster. We're just nice to them because they're sick. And so it's a hard thing to get a hold of with a lot of these practices. I think we're promised with therapy and meditation and spiritual paths that we're going to feel better. We're going to find a better way. But otherwise, I mean, you can't sell a program that's like, this is a practice of you're just going to feel bad before you feel better. Who's going to want to do that? And it's a hard thing to commit to. So that's the biggest thing, is how can we just be nice to ourselves just because we're feel bad? And so I was just reading, Kristen Neff or Chris Germer says, this mindfulness self-compassion is a practice of goodwill, not good feeling. Can we bring goodwill to our trauma and suffering?
The reason I'm cracking up every time you talk about the reality of, when you open the door that you don't necessarily feel better is because you're such a perfect fit for the Mind Oasis community for two reasons, maybe three. One is because we do actually talk about that at Mind Oasis, that when you start to fiddle with your mind, i.e., sitting for 10 to 20 minutes, we use a lot of shamatha-based meditation. So it's really a focus on your breath and then the cycle of breath and using that as an anchor for your mind, that everything that's been there anyway begins to arise. And because we're all so busy and ignoring or suppressing completely all that good stuff, all that fodder, it can feel like you're having your skin ripped off your body when you first start your practice. And so you have to kind of hang in there. It's part of why we really talk a lot about community on Mind Oasis. So that's one thing. Secondly, I love that you described yourself as just a regular guy who practices Chinese medicine and rides your bike. So one of the reasons that I think Mind Oasis is a potent community is because we are all just normal people who do whatever it is, ride your bike, or, I trail run and ride my motorcycle, who have gotten interested in some sort of healing or spiritual arts. And then we learn something and want to share it with others. And when I started Mind Oasis, that was actually my vision, was that instead of having some hierarchical teacher, student, or guru student, which I have a guru, I have a lama myself, but that we as people, householders in and of the world, could co-create a space and learn from one another. So as you were talking about mindful self-compassion, which you're going to do your little freebie. So we do these 30-minute free mini workshops. And the idea is that it gives people the opportunity to work with you for like 30 minutes and just sort of get to know you, get to know your jam, and see if it's a good fit, which of course it will be because you're an amazing human. The mini is called the Self-Compassion Break. And that's on July 22nd. So it's coming up quickly. Can you tell us, without giving, don't let the cat completely out of the bag, but what is the idea of a self-compassion break?
And this is great too, to define what mindfulness self-compassion is. And we're going to use Kristen Neff's definition. And Kristen Neff is a researcher at UT in Austin. And you can look her up. She has a ton of, TED Talks and her world. And she's amazing to study with, because there's one version of her online, but then if you get to be in a training with her, she has amazing stories about how difficult it is to be. Her son is autistic on the spectrum, and just how hard that's been and the different stuff. So she's got some great stuff, but her definition is, first we have the mindfulness, what's going on. And we'll go with the idea that we need this when we're having suffering or distress. And that happens all the time. And often,
totally.
And like you said, we're too busy. We have to shut it down. We have to go do, and sometimes it's appropriate. We have to go do something right then that we can't just feel, which is sad. And yet it's the realities of our world. And then the next part is to bring in the component of humanity, and that I am not alone. The common humanity of suffering together on this planet. And so That's a big part of self-compassion, and their work is I'm not alone in the suffering. So I'm mindful that I'm having a hard time. I'm not alone in this suffering. And then the self-compassion part is, what do I need for myself? And we often think of self-compassion and compassion as nurturing. You know, I got to be nice to myself. I need to get a massage. I need a cup of tea. But Kristen Neff just put out a new book called Fierce Compassion. And so sometimes the self-compassionate thing can be to do is to leave a situation that is bad or hurting us, or leave a relationship, or to say no, or to put up a boundary. A mother protecting its child, or a father protecting its child and family. Us claiming to the world who we really are and taking a stand for that. Those are incredibly difficult things, and those are incredibly compassionate. So the self-compassion doesn't just have to be kindness. It needs to be whatever actually we need to do in the world. And that's a big, big topic. So what's happening? I'm not alone in what's happening. Others are suffering. And what do I need to do for myself right now? That's the self-compassion break. And at first, we practice it as a mini meditation, and we learn some different tools and ways to calm the mind through little techniques, physical things we can do. And we explore that together to find out what works for you, because what works for some people doesn't. Like you brought up the breath meditation. Sometimes, depending on what's happened, breathing meditation can send somebody into a literal panic attack, and it's scary. So we have to try on as many tools as we can so that we can find something in some way into this world of our own suffering, so we can really start working on it, because otherwise it's always there. And we can see that with certain people, depending on who we've lived with and our parents and families, where it doesn't go well if we haven't worked on it, I guess. I don't know.
What do you say to people like me? Like when you said fierce compassion, my ears finally perked up, because the world of self-compassion does not actually speak to me. And of course, why? This is such psychology 101, right? Because probably I'm not particularly self-compassionate towards myself, right? And in fact, I had a girlfriend last night tell me I'm so hard on me, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Probably I am. I also think that's part of, it's always the double-edged sword, right? It's also probably why I can get a lot of things done and rally the masses around Mind Oasis, is because I'm more focused on making something big for the world than fixing some of the stuff within me. So for those of us who hear self-compassion and kind of want to run for the hills, is it accessible? Is it an accessible idea if you're a little bit of a skeptic?
Well, Karina, you are the textbook example of the first couple pages.
Darn it!
No, it's perfect, because we don't cover it very much in the 6-week program because we just don't have time. But the regular 8-week version, I don't even like teaching the first 2 sessions, because it's all the didactic research around, if I'm not hard on myself, I'm not going to get anything done. No, you're going to love it. It's hysterical. It's an actual quote. Like you're like quoting the material right out of the manual. But the research just shows the opposite, and you have to try it. So the research shows that actually somebody who can be kind or give themselves whatever they actually need, not just that strong voice, can actually perform better over a longer period of time.
Of course. I can't believe it. And I just want our listeners and viewers to know, Kelly and I did not plan that conversation in any way, shape, or form. So this is really beautiful.
Yeah. And really you're saying the things, we literally read those quotes and go, what do you think that? Or that you are answering one of the questions in the first sessions, like, why wouldn't you be self-compassionate? Well, I won't get anything done, or I've been so hard on myself. That's why I've achieved so much in the world. And and that's true. It's worked up until now. And I think we can hit, depending on who we are, we hit a point in our life. And they say this in the Hoffman, your MO, your modus operandi stops working. And you're all of a sudden like, oh, what I usually do to deal with this situation is no longer working. And it's part of the midlife passage. So what do you do? And it's worked. It's probably worked really well.
Again, if you're listening, you're not seeing this like shit eating grin I have on my face, but I just have to say that like I'm 46. By the way, I bought a motorcycle last year. So we know already that I'm in the classic midlife crisis. I've been going through some pretty intense therapy to sort of finally really lay down the old bootstraps. I mean, the bootstraps are exhausting. I've gotten real familiar with my habits, what I go to, whether it's wine or whether it's going to fix a problem immediately instead of trying to just hear. So like in my partnership, in my marriage through the pandemic, right, we were stuck up in the mountains together in this little old house. It was rough. And, Joseph would say things to me like, can you just hear what I'm saying? And I'm thinking to myself, well, why the fuck would I want to just hear what you're saying? I want to fix what you're saying. So if it's whether it's money or it's, the way that I act or whatever it is, it's like, well, it's got to get fixed. And then I realized that that's my MO. I fix things. I avoid things. I go out into the world with a big grin on my face and try to make it look pretty. So when we're ready to put that, frankly, bullshit down, it sounds to me like this 6-week series, which is called Being Kind to Ourselves in Moments of Sufferings. It feels like it's like anyone who's in the middle of midlife crisis, this would be a wonderful 6-week series to attend. You want to tell us just a little bit more? Anything?
I mean, you nailed it though. And it's, over the 6 weeks, we just explore different ways and different tools because different things are going to work for different people. Like your example is great. And I kind of want to know what motorcycle you bought.
Oh, first of all, his name is Snow Thunder. He is a Thunder Black Indian Scout bobber, 2022, and he has 1,000 cc's engine with 78 horsepower. He is a bad boy, and I love him to pieces.
That is a very cool motorcycle. I used to ride, and especially dual sports in Arizona. But I had a terrifying wreck in 2005 on the original BMW R100 GS from '88. And I got very lucky where I could walk away with a separated shoulder, and 1 second in either direction on that corner, I would have been in a river or I would have been in a guardrail. I got lucky. So I do love motorcycles, but I stick to the mountain bikes, which are getting more dangerous here at Galbraith, because this is a whole new level of riding where they have these huge rock drops and you learn how to jump and you're flying through. It's crazy. It's awesome.
Oh my God, that's so terrifying. I went over the Continental Divide with my motorcycle for the first time yesterday, where there's these sheer cliffs of literally like 1,000 feet fall to death with no shoulder. And as much as I think of myself as a tough girl, as somewhat fearless, I have to say I was hyperventilating in my mask or in my helmet for about a full 15 minutes. I was happy I had my practice because I'm pretty sure it's the only thing that kept me on the road or able to keep moving forward for a couple of the passes.
I know. And I know that road too. And then look, the views just grab you. And I
couldn't even look at the views. I was single point. I've never been so happy to have someone in front of me ever. Because usually, right, you want to go faster and you're like, get out of my way, I'm on a motorcycle. And instead I was like intent on this Texas license plate that was in front of me. And I was just focused on the license plate.
Awesome. Yeah, well, there's so many questions, and the midlife passage is a big one for, I'm 49, and Yeah, it's a weird thing. And you don't have, you're not, until you're in it, you don't even know it exists and start talking about it and just what's important and really asking that, what's important, how much time do I have, um, and what am I going to do? And then how am I going to do it? Because we can't, I don't know, there's a lot of different things. Christina, my wife, is big into the Jungian studies. So she's listening to podcasts and studying that world. And she was a counselor therapist, especially with young adults. But the idea, there's some quote from somebody who, Psyche is a character in the Greek pantheon, or I don't know, and this person said, if you stop listening to Psyche will just stop trying to give you messages, which is a powerful idea, that if you stop listening to yourselves, your subconscious will just give up or save it for the next lifetime or whatever thing you believe. It's kind of like, that's a little disturbing. And we're constantly getting messages from the universe, and in so many different ways, depending and irrelevant of religious backgrounds and different things. There's so many ways to see them, many ways we can get messages from the world, and the universe is trying to talk to us. And then how can we be how can we be kind to ourselves in the midst of all those hard things? And there's so much ground to cover. But what has struck me too, with what you're sharing, Karuna, especially with your crew and Mind Oasis, is you guys have to look at David Treleaven's work around trauma and mindfulness. It's so powerful because so many of us have it, and in so many different ways. And he talks about when he first started meditating, and I'm not sure of his lineage, but he would come to his teacher and say, this is happening, I'm really struggling. And he has started working with students, like veterans and stuff, to try to meditate. And they would just be like this, I'm in flashback the whole time. And often if a teacher hasn't had any trauma training or dealt with their own trauma, they'll just go, well, you go deal with that on the mat. That's not useful. We need tools to deal with that stuff. And so these little tools in mindfulness, self-compassion, can at least start giving us a little something to deal with what is coming up in a way. And I'm definitely of the type that, depending on who you are and what you have, go find the expert that can help you with that. I can, like this little thing we're going to do in a month, and then 6 programs, a little introduction to some ideas that hopefully implant a different little voice in your head. So when you're having a hard time and the one voice is yelling at you to do the old, there's maybe a new voice of like, hey, maybe you just need to take a break and create some space so you can hear a different view. So I don't know. That's what we've got in this little thing.
Amazing. Okay, so the 6-week series. Am I right about it being 6 weeks?
Yes.
I'm the boss. I never know what the hell's going on. It starts on the 5th of August. It goes through the 9th of September. It's on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Central. Woo, Kelly. 7 a.m. baby. You're gonna have to pump the coffee straight into the vein.
I did not want to do that, but it was like, all right, we'll just get up. And it makes for a sober Wednesday. I was thinking about your wine comment. Here in Bellingham, it's beer and cider. The brewery.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's kind of an epidemic in our country. And for me, it's definitely one of the things that I've been working with and on and all that good stuff. It's a lifelong, I grew up in Wisconsin. Some habits are very difficult to break, and I have found wine to be one of them. But I like meditation more. I like spiritual practices more. I like the way that I feel, on a really clear, crisp morning, right? So it's all a bunch of figuring it out, I suppose. So again, mindful self-compassion with Kelly on Mind Oasis. You can go to mindoasis.org and you just go to the Learn tab, and you'll scroll down and register for the freebie, and then register for mindful self-compassion, being kind to ourselves in moments of sufferings. It sounds like it would be a wonderful offering, whether you're wishing to join as a participant to work on your own stuff, or also to bring this into the arenas in which you teach. So if you're a yoga teacher, if you are a spiritual practitioner who teaches and shares, if you're a meditation guide, this is definitely a series for you. So before we wrap up, and again, it's mindoasis.org, and just go to the Learn tab. You'll find Kelly there. Before we wrap up, I always like to ask the same question. We've talked. We have tea or something. I have coffee in my mug. What you got going on in yours?
Mine's a little green tea.
Very nice, very nice. So now we have to get to the truth. So Kelly, what's your truth?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm asking that right now, literally. And this is a little odd, but studying with Chinese medicine, there's 5 planets we talk about and how they can influence the body. And then in Jyotish astrology is another form of looking at the planets. I just went into a whole new planetary time in May called Rahu. And Rahu's a shadow planet, the lunar node to the moon that causes eclipses, which we just came out of with the pandemic. And I'll finally be in my real work in this lifetime, is one way to look at it. And it's incredibly fitting time-wise that I've started teaching this, because I haven't had this until a year or two ago, and the mindfulness self-compassion. So I'm figuring out what my truth is right now, learning who I am. I do know we need to enjoy ourselves. And along with the reality of suffering is the reality of magic that is available and around. That's a big one for me.
Awesome. Can you, when the astrology Jyotish, is it Joytish?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, wonderful.
Well,
I just wanted,
depending on the spellings, but yes, and there's some, Dr. Sabota does some, he would call himself not an expert, which is incredibly humble. And there's some different people around. It's very interesting. And at first you'd be like, I don't believe it. And then when you can see some of the dates and look back at your life, you're like, that's an oddly disturbing map of times. And it's not like predictive about, it can really helps give us an idea of what we should be doing when in our life, or whether we're really, are you building a business and you should be a musician, or are you being a musician and you should be building business? And for some of us, like I'm a late bloomer as far as everything in my life. And so seeing some of that has helped make sense of what's happened. Hasn't made it some of that stuff from the past. I'll never have a very satisfying answer. Multiple lifetimes, your karmas and stuff, that just doesn't satisfy the answer of children being used and abused, but it's a part of the human condition. And so part of my truth would be, I definitely would like a little less suffering for little kids, that's for sure. And our own little kids inside ourselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in the reclaiming of you.
Yeah.
Some work that's some work that I've been doing. The reclaiming of me as a 10-year-old, and she and I like to dance.
It's so good. And you're I don't know your dosha, but if I had to say, you would lean towards pitta.
99% on those damn tests.
And I'm a redhead. I'm literally burning out my thing. But one of the remedies or prescriptions for pitta is play.
Please don't tell my life coach that, or she's going to get on my ass even more about going out and resting and digesting.
Just having fun and finding that playfulness in the world. It's not easy though. I don't find it easy. Because, I love getting a bunch of shit done.
Oh my God, these are going to be the best offerings on Mind Oasis. All right, July 22nd coming up. the self-compassion break with Kelly Sell. This is a freebie offering on Mind Oasis, people. mindoasis.org. Go to the Learn tab. You're going to see 22nd of July, and you'll see Kelly, and you can register there. You get the recording if you can't make it live, but try to make it live. And then the 5th of August kicks off the series, a 6-week series with Kelly, Mindful Self-Compassion, being kind to ourselves in times of suffering. Kelly, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you. It's been great.